Welcome to the Lift Oneself podcast, where we break mental health stigmas through conversations. I'm your host, Nat, and we dive into topics about trauma and how it impacts the nervous system. Yet we don't just leave you there. We share insights and tools of self-care, meditation, and growth that help you be curious about your own biology. Your presence matters. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. Help our community grow. Let's get into this. Oh, and please remember to be kind to yourself. Welcome to the Lift Oneself podcast. I'm Nat, your host, and I have a very special guest, Thomas. So, Thomas, would you be gracious enough to introduce yourself to the listeners and to myself, because I don't know everything about you.
All right. Yeah, my name's Thomas Brown. I am an author, podcaster, and mental health advocate. I just recently, I lost my brother to suicide in 2020. Sorry, I lost my brother to suicide in 2001. In 2012, kind of trying to promote that book. I've been I had a podcast I have two podcasts. One's kind of on hold, called Inner Monologue, and for about 6 years I was creating a platform to promote other people and their story and their journey.
While they're listening to a podcast, they're driving. So please don't close your eyes. I want you to be safe, yet all the other prompts you're able to follow. So please get comfortable in your seat, and you're going to gently close your eyes. And you're going to begin breathing in and out through your nose. And you're going to bring your awareness to watching your breath go in and out through your nose. You're not going to try and control your breath. Just going to let the awareness watch the rhythm of your breath and allow it to guide you in your body. By now, there's probably some sensations and feelings coming up. It's okay. Let them arise. You're safe to feel. You're safe to let go. Surrender the need to control. Release the need to resist and just be. Be with your breath. Drop deeper into your body. There's probably some thoughts or to-do lists that may have come up in your mind. That's okay. Gently bring your awareness back to your breath, creating space between your awareness and those thoughts, and going deeper into the body. Staying with the breath. Those thoughts may have popped back up. Bringing your awareness back to your breath, creating more space between the awareness and the thoughts, and going deeper into your body. Now, while still staying with your breath at your own time and at your own pace, you're going to gently open your eyes while staying with your breath. How's your heart doing?
Outside of the caffeine I had about an hour ago, pretty good. Uh,
Um, and I know going into stillness when all that agitation, it's like, well, okay, yeah, let's rock and roll with that. We are in a time difference. So my time right now is going on 7 p.m. What time is it for you?
it's going on 4.
Yeah. Um, so I'm presently watching the sunset, which I was just going in awe before we started recording. And I was telling Thomas how I use that as a grounding method for myself to, release whatever is constricted in my body and allow there to be an openness and a vastness to go beyond my little small narrative and be in the bigness of the universe and everything that, I don't have control over, yet takes very well care of me. So I am the sun and the moon I chase after.
I'm a big sunrise and sunset person. I've, if we talk about a little bit about the bicycle adventure, I went through 21 states on that journey a few years earlier. I walked across country with a group of people and went through 13 states on that adventure. And I got to tell you, I love an Arizona sunset. There's something about that desert sunset or sunrise where there's just not a lot of obstruction, a lot of wide open space with beautiful mountains in the background and just a spectacular sky. So
Yeah, I guess that's going to be on my bucket list.
it's crazy too because I don't like Arizona, but like I love our sunsets and sunrises.
Yeah, it's fascinating too how the sun looks so different depending on where you're standing on this earth.
Yeah,
That each
perspective.
backdrop. Yeah. Like some places, like, most times it's just an average size here. Yet there's been times where the sun is setting here and it reminds me of those Star Wars blood red sunsets. And it's like, I'm in Star Wars, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
And it's
totally.
so huge. And I'm like, but I'm not in the Caribbean because in the Caribbean you see it so big. But yet
Mhm.
sometimes for some reason, just that opening, it's like, wow, I'm blessed to be able to see it. Yet usually I see it only this way. Yet the more you travel, you see, depending on where you are in the earth, the sun and the perspective of it is so different. And
Totally.
it's invigorating because then it shows you in your own life, you can view things from different perspectives. It might be the same thing, yet if you open yourself up, you can see different ways about it and different shades and different textures. Before we started, you spoke about your brother.
Hmm.
So I would like to know his name,
His name's Mark Brown.
Mark Brown.
He was 6 years older than me. He died 3 weeks before his 30th birthday. Um, and it was about 3.5 weeks before 9/11. So I remember that like vividly as like the world seemed to be falling apart, especially here in the States. My world had already had like a massive blow to it. So, there was kind of like a selfishness and ego to my pain of like, well, now everybody else can feel as shitty as I am. you know
Yeah.
it's an absurd thought to have, but when you're in the midst of trauma, there's nothing logical about those emotions.
Not at
So
all. Not at all. And I think, when you learn more about trauma, it's not avoiding those dense emotions. It's actually asking it, what is the information, and allowing it to have some expression. Yet it feels very uncomfortable because they're very overwhelming. And there's some authentic emotions that we've probably never even were able to feel at one point. So now you're interacting with something that you don't even have the verbiage or the tools to process and not let it hijack your behavior or shut you down. Yet you do have to disassociate. You do have to be messy through this whole process. There is no
Yeah.
perfection in that kind of grief.
Yeah, yeah, and I would also say that like the spectrum of emotions is so vast that we probably have a lot more emotions than we have words to describe them. And when you have an inability to articulate something, that only adds to the frustration.
Exactly. Because now, you go through an experience and you understand it. And then when somebody gives some language to it, you're like, that's it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I have verbiage.
Eureka!
Somebody can see me and I can kind of like relate with it outside of my mind. And I'm not crazy and I'm not this and I'm not like, oh my gosh, somebody else knows what this feels like or can give context to it. But it's such a liberating thing when you can finally give verbiage to an experience and
Yeah.
also share it with somebody else that they can relate or understand it in their capacity. Like all of our experiences are very individual, yet there's a lot of similarities to what we are experiencing.
Yeah, and I often say like, when there isn't a word to describe it, that's where poetry comes from,
Yeah,
of being able to like describe your feeling through metaphor. And
yeah,
like usually like sometimes that is like what hits me the most is when somebody can, describe an emotional feeling through like poetic metaphor, that usually hits me the hardest. I'm like, damn, yeah. Oh yeah.
now I have a question about Mark. In his life, was there any signs of his mental health or suicidal ideation or any depression or any insight? Did he share any of the darkness?
So in hindsight, like at the time, no. This is 2001. I was always like really open with my emotions. I was a very sensitive person and I had no problem saying like, "Hey, I'm sad, I'm confused, blah blah," and even crying when I was feeling overwhelmed. But I never had a sense of like, oh, maybe I need a therapist. You know, I got my
Yeah.
friends and I'll talk to them. So, despite my openness, I was still an outlier. That was mental health was something that we just didn't discuss. And I think when it comes to like mental health issues, especially back then, it's something that you can't see. And if I
Mhm.
if I can't see it and I can't describe it, then you can't see it, so you might not take me seriously. But if I had a
Mhm.
broken arm, you'd have more sympathy for me. So I think my brother was, first of all, his vice was he was a his vice was women. He
Mhm.
was hurt very early on, like right after high school, he was hurt in a relationship. Um, and he just vowed he would never let a woman make him feel that way again. And I couldn't even tell you the responsible factors of that relationship that went sour. It's just he had a negative reaction to it. And so
Mhm.
he became a womanizer. And for about close to 10 years, he had two women that were one was his heart, one was his trophy. Unfortunately for me, one of them was somebody that I had been friends with since like grade school, and we had now graduated high school, and the other one was my boss. So I didn't want to be a part of that, and I was stuck smack dab in the middle. In order to be a really good at something somewhat nefarious, such as womanizing and having multiple partners without them knowing, in order to sell a story, you got to believe a story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, besides those two women, my brother had other conquests, what he would describe as conquests on the side to go with that. So he was just, if you didn't care about the low character of that behavior, you could be in awe at the web he was able to weave, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
He was really good at it. And all that being said, with that, when those relationships ended, they weren't they weren't by his intentions, and they both ended at the same time. And so his house of cards came crumbling down, and he couldn't handle it. And instead
Mhm.
of telling people that he was sad, he was upset, he was frightened, he was scared, he told people that he had cancer. So he created another story in order to cope with the pain that he was feeling.
Mm.
Um, in hindsight, that's a big red flag. I was at the time, I was 23, getting ready to turn 24, and I was a confused young man at that time. Um, and my brother had a lot more power in the family dynamic than I really respected that he had. So I was kind of like, once again, I was the outlier with how I expressed myself emotionally amongst my peers and my family, and I was also an outlier of my family. I was the black sheep of the of
Yeah.
my family. Um, so like in hindsight, that was a huge, huge, huge red flag of just not being able to be honest and
Mhm.
open. And I would say that like his view of what a strong, man is and how he emotionally abused these women for his own, carnal lusts and desires.
Yeah, and he was soothing his pain.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That I think that idea, that one small trait of toxic masculinity, uh the very idea of that idea of what it is to be a man was eventually, to me, was the thing that killed him. Yeah, like if the suicide was, was the symptom of a deeper wound that he was unable to to deal with and process. So yeah, to answer your question, like at that time, I didn't see the red flags. I didn't think that my brother was capable of that because he was so bombastic.
Hmm. Hmm.
He
Yeah,
was
the
a
mask.
he was a singer. He had a lot of charisma, and it was something that I would have never conceived of. I'd never had an experience like that before either. So that's
Of
probably
course.
why.
Um, and the mask that people put on, they don't allow you to see the vulnerability. So
Hmm.
that mask he put on, there was armament, and there's no way that you're going to see the vulnerability, and the pain and the wounding that's going on internally. Uh, how did you feel guilt in your process of grief?
I didn't, to be
Okay.
honest with you. My brother and I were I liked to smoke pot at that age. I was a big cannabis user, really into like experimentation and seeing like where I could put my mind. Um, it was a little reckless because, I didn't have like the emotional fortitude that one would need with psychedelics at that time period. And I didn't have anybody to guide me, but I really liked cannabis, and it really it helped me kind of deal with the not with the emotions, but with like the physical reaction that I would have to emotions, if
Yeah, the
that makes any
sensitivity.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. Of course, you were
So
toning that, like,
yeah, yeah, I would still feel them, but I would just like, it helped me like calm down a little bit. He didn't like that I smoked pot, and I didn't like that he was a womanizer, but we both worked for the same um organization at the time. And I was just like, look, man, I just don't want to be a part of your story in that capacity. Like, just keep me out of it. We
yeah.
could still be brothers. We could still like hang out. Just I don't want to be involved. And to him, that was betrayal. So he kind of tarnished my name at the time within the organization that we worked in. And so we had a massive falling out, and we didn't talk. And it wasn't until his relationships were over, and this is probably like 3 years after, once we kind of deviated from each other, is when we started to come back together. So I'm grateful more than anything that we had the time left that we
Mhm.
had. I remember one night in particular, he was always against weed, and he came over. I was house sitting for somebody, and he came over, and we were always big movie buffs as well. And Star Wars was one of our jams. And he's like, "Hey, I want to come over and smoke weed with you." And I was like, "All right, cool, come on over." And we got high, and then we watched Empire Strikes Back. And just to like watch him watch, speaking of perspective, you know, his perspective had been altered in the way that was super novel to him. And so when he was watching Empire Strikes Back, it was like he was watching it for the first time. And we just had this like very beautiful brotherly experience together that we hadn't had in years. And it's one of the things that I will actually cherish the most. Um, I had a little bit of anger
Mm.
with him, but it didn't last. It didn't linger very much after that. It was more of just like a sadness that he was gone. And my brother was a golden boy. My parents knew that he was a womanizer, but he was there first and he was a golden boy. And my parents, we never wanted for anything. There was food on the table, there was a roof above our head, there was, you know, clothes on our backs. And they taught us a lot about compassion and accepting the differences of others. And those are lessons I'm so grateful that I got from them. But outside of that, there wasn't this like profound wizard sorceress like wisdom. you know, they were simple people from a simple time. And when I say simple time, I mean small town, limited technology.
Mm.
And they were raising these two boys in the midst of an explosion of technology in the late 70s and 80s and into the 90s. So they
Commodore
just
64.
yeah, they just didn't have that understanding while we were the ones that were like learning it as it was coming up. So just very like limited capacity. I'm very grateful for the compassion and empathy that they gave to us, but there was something in me that needed a little bit more. And I think
Yeah.
that's where like the drug experimentation kind of came from. Um, but I was more concerned with them after my brother's death. Like
Hmm.
even though I was not prepared as a 24-year-old lost person
Yeah.
that had no self-confidence and was completely codependent on the worst types of people. Um, I was more concerned with them. Like I remember knowing that my brother had died, but not knowing how he had died, and being told to meet my parents at the social services department, which was connected to the same building that I worked at that time, wondering what was going on, knowing that it had to do with my brother and that he was dead. I hadn't been given that confirmation. I just knew.
Mm.
Um, and then like trying to call my dad and then hearing like this broken, weeping adult sound creep up from behind me while I'm like leaving a voice message for him and I turn around, it's my dad. He's never been the same. He's
Okay.
never been the same. And we just had my brother's 23rd anniversary. He's
Hmm.
he's never been the same. And I don't have children. I don't plan on having children. I feel like my father is now my child because my mom passed away about 16 months ago and I'm his caretaker. Like he can live on his own, but like I still have to like I manage his life. I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
I never wanted children. Now I got a 78-year-old toddler.
Yeah. I can.
I don't have to worry about him sticking thing into electrical sockets or wandering off. So I'm good. I'm good right now. Um,
Yeah.
but it's still like having the responsibility of another life. I just, outside of a pet, I never have had that, and I didn't want to have children, and I still don't want to have children. So it was just always like my parents were my focus, and so I don't think I had time. Like I got over my anger pretty quick, and I didn't have time to feel guilty about anything.
Yeah.
That's a different story from what other people. Some
Yeah.
people like that's all they have is guilt,
Yeah.
and I don't have that story, but I still try to remind people is that like, if somebody has it in their mind to do that, they're gonna find a way.
Yeah, it's like
You
beyond their control because our biology to actually, um, dive by mental health, it takes a lot of strength and courage because your biology doesn't want to die.
resist
Like
it. Yeah.
it will like be apprehensive, it viscerally pull you back, all these kind of things. So to be able to override that, that's something of a very deep darkness that you don't have access to your behavior also. I know
Yeah.
that.
I
Go
was gonna
ahead.
say, yeah, and not only that, but like, um, it's from my experience and all the stories that I've heard, it's more of I just want the pain to end.
Yeah, it is.
I don't want to leave this place. I just want the pain to end, and
Yeah,
that's understandable.
of course. Of course. And that's why, when people have this narrative, I really loathe when I'm hearing the religion and hell and that the person isn't saved, and then the family members are all, and I'm like, where are you causing more pain and suffering for those that are still living with this? And who are you to cast judgment on someone that you don't even know the depths of pain that they were having to deal with day in and day out?
Yeah,
Like, if you haven't experienced a really dysregulated nervous system, you have no idea what kind of hell is going on in someone's mind all the time and how viscerally and physically painful that is,
yeah.
and no escape from it. Like there's nowhere to escape because it's inside you.
I I mentioned something in my book. So in like the suicide loss survivors community, they they kind of create their own rules and their own reasoning for it. And I've always been an outlier. I don't look like it. My meat suit has me looking, heterosexual white male, like like kind of like won the lottery for meat suits. But like I still like my mind and how I look at things, I feel like puts me once I open up my mouth and I lay out my thoughts, like that kind of like puts me against a lot of other people that look like they should be my peers. But in that community, like I always hear this gripe about you can't use the word commit. You can't use the word committed. And I'm just like, man, that's a dumb semantical argument. And I've seen I used to lead support groups. After my bike ride when I came back, I led support groups for people who lost loved ones to suicide. And that's a pretty intense room where you're helping to manage egos and create a safe space, like what you're doing. Um, and I saw in my training like somebody who's brand new to it use the word committed and somebody else who would, a few years out and they're like, we don't use that word. I'm just like, there are people out there that will say that my loved one is burning in hell, or they'll say that my loved one was a coward. And that's a level of bullshit that people don't need to deal with when they've lost someone to suicide. Why are you going to create strife within our own community by telling people what language they are allowed and not allowed to use when talking about it? So I still like, people like we say die by, and I'm like, you can say whatever you want. I lost my brother to suicide. You're not going to tell me I can't use the word committed. All right. Uh, I just like it to me, it's a semantical argument that is a waste of energy when there's actual people that we should be concerned with. And that's what you brought up, the people that say like they're cowards or they're burning in hell. So sorry, that's just one of my soapboxes that I have to like lay
Oh,
out there.
it gets me amped up also. And I like, do you understand? Like, you just took salt and alcohol and poured it in someone's wound by saying
Yeah,
this stuff just
yeah.
because you have a belief system. You don't even have the empathy to be a decent human being, to keep your mouth shut about whatever you may believe and just hold space for this person that's in pain.
That seems to be a problem amongst from what I can tell, first worlds all around the world.
So,
I can't speak
I,
for any other. That's why I'm speaking for the world that I live in, you know. So
yeah,
it's wild.
Yeah.
It's
And I'm mindful because, I've known some people, even my neighbor, like during COVID, his nephew had died by suicide. And he came to me and he asked me, like, do you think he's gone to heaven? I'm like, of course he is. I'm like, of course. And he's needing validation because he's rumbling with it as a Catholic man that, well, my belief has it that if anybody that dies by suicide is gone straight to hell. And it's like, no, no, like your nephew was in a lot of pain. And that is
yeah.
why he did what he had to do for himself.
And it's funny too, is that like there's a gentleman that I met. His name's Frank Campbell, and he's one of the activists. He's a thanatologist and a suicidologist, so means the study of death and suicide. And he's a really big name here in the States for um, helping to create the community of support groups for people to talk to. And he gave us a little history lesson of how that even became a thing. Um, and it all happened like back in Europe uh, during in the Middle Ages, of where, because life was so hard for the common peasant man, that there was a lot of like rash of like suicides.
Hmm.
And when you have a man back in that time period killing themselves, well, you're losing taxation and you're
Hmm.
losing work. So
Labor.
the state went to the church and was like, how do we deal with this? And it was pretty much decided then that, like, well, we won't allow those people to, not only will we not allow them to be buried in the church, we won't
Hmm.
allow them to be buried in the town. And we will we'll we'll look down on
Created.
the other family members who are still alive. So, it just blows my mind of, people don't, and that's my big beef with the world in which, I'm a part of now here in like a first world country like the States. Again, I bring that up because I can't speak for another nation because I'm not a part of that nation. So, if this resonates with you wherever you're at, like, you know, run with it. But I feel like there's such like a lack of awareness, and with awareness, the lack of self-awareness, lack of understanding of why do I believe the things that I believe? Where do they come from? And that there's no real curiosity to dig deeper into the story of who I am. And when I say the story of who am I outside of every single influence that has been vying to control my view of reality? That's family story, the religion in which you were raised, um, the the
Ed-
nation that you were, the education, the political system, just like, who am I at its core? And I think for me, my kind of philosophy, or my belief system, is that not knowing who we truly are, and the world is going to tell you who you are. And if that goes against your nature, and even though you don't even know what your nature is that's a recipe for emotional and spiritual catastrophe.
Very much so. Very, very much so. And we're seeing a lot of that with people. As you said, at a certain point, there were so many suicides. And right now, the way the economy and the way humans are treating each other, it's almost like we're going through another kind of plague with mental health.
Hmm.
um, because just the way humans are treating each other, that the capitalism has really just mesmerized people and thinking that it like zombies, walking
Hmm.
zombies, that the materialistic world is much more important than being a decent human being to another human being, and
Yeah.
seeing that life is so valuable, and really just treating people like they're indispensable and that they have no value. If you have nothing to contribute towards this capitalism part, you aren't worthy of being anywhere in this realm or whatnot. And I think, that's the reason why I created this podcast, is to remove the stigmas around mental health, and that people had a space where they could hear different modalities of how they're going to engage with mental health and find the courage to do that critical thinking, to question things. Like
Mhm.
I was a hedonism and a disruptor. I come from a Catholic religion, and as a girl, I was always questioning the priests and questioning things, and my mother used to cringe and be like, "Just shut up." But I was like that. Like, why can't I touch Bible? Why does the priest only can touch Bible? And then I have to go through him to talk to God? Like that stuff doesn't make sense. So I'm thankful for the bravery that I had in myself to be like, I'm not drinking your Kool-Aid. Like, this is not making sense to me. And being able to question it. Did I get shunned? Did I get trauma from it? Of course. Yeah, I think we have to hold the space for people to start questioning things for themselves and really start getting possession back of their mind, of their consciousness, of their awareness. What possessed you to walk and bike for such
Um, so my cross to bear was always codependency. And I was so frightened and scared and uncertain with life and what I was supposed to do and how to live it. Um, that I would latch on to anybody that seemed to be good at pretending that they knew what was going on. So I had a lot of like toxic relationships. And there was just something brewing within me. There was all these things that I always wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to do. I didn't know how to do them, but I just didn't have the courage to go off on alone on my, I was afraid that like, oh, if I go off and do this, then like I won't be around my friends and that's terrifying. Not realizing that I would meet other people along the way. Um, and finally I just got sick of it. I had a what I call my hetero life mate friend since like second grade, and him and I were like living together. He went to a different high school, and so we didn't have high school, but after we both graduated, we hung out all the time. And it was a toxic relationship. And then I was in a intimate relationship with this woman that was also toxic. And I just knew that I needed to change. And my parents, um, in 2006, like they had been part of this very, very, very progressive church, very progressive, one step below Unitarian. They still considered themselves to be Christian, but they were open and affirming to other sexual orientation. They believed that there was more than one path in the Christian path to connecting with God. They believed that we should take care of our brothers and sisters, so they're big into social justice. They thought we should take care of the planet. They believed that secular art was just as powerful as scripture. So I was just digging on them. I dug the entire platform. And so I was like, hey, I'll walk with you guys. And there was a filmmaker that was following them, and he was all by himself and he needed an assistant. So they were like, hey, instead of just being a walker, do you want to we know that you're interested in film. Would you like to be the production assistant? Which pretty much meant I had to do everything. I shot, I recorded audio, I did some video editing, I did a lot of stuff. And plus, I walked backwards a lot while I was interviewing the walkers as they were walking forward. So it was just kind of like theology on the road and film school on the road. And it was the really kind of like the first steps of me disassociating myself from some of those toxic traits. When I was done with the walk, I was still in that intimate relationship with the woman that was like horrible, and I still didn't have a therapist. And I came back from that. I went into film school, and I was having the growing pains of like loneliness. I'm not gonna, because I'm lonely, I'm not gonna just jump into every toxic relationship, even though I was still in an intimate one that was toxic. But I was starting to make those steps. And then I finally got sick of that relationship and I knew that I needed change. And so in 2008, I found myself in a therapist's office. And she really helped me tear the onion of my consciousness and my awareness apart, and it really helped me. And that's when, 2 years later, I was finally out of that relationship. I met this guy Zach, who had also lost his brother to suicide, and in the summer of 2010 we had this conversation and talked about doing this bike ride. I was really inspired by that walk, and I know how much it changed me, and I know what it did for me. It's one thing about, like, it's always great to have a community, especially a
Yeah.
positive one, but it's also good to step away from your community,
Mhm.
because whether we are aware of it or not, there's some authorship that our community has of our own story. And I think it's
Mhm.
important to kind of like separate yourself from that so that you can see who you are even outside of your community, so that you can play more of the author of your own narrative and get a little bit of extra perspective of who you are. Um, and I knew all that and I just knew that like this bike ride would be something else, because the walk, I was inspired by the message. I believed in the message and I supported the message, but it was somebody else's message.
Yeah.
So that was my first step. So when we decided to do the bike ride, this was my opportunity to share my message. And
Mhm.
and to me, when it came to like suicide awareness and mental health, one of the tools in which I use for awareness, social awareness, spatial awareness, and self-awareness is art and creativity. And how either being a witness to beautiful art helps me process, or dabbling with my own creative ability, and making something that's my own, whether it's good or not, that how much that helps me in my process. So I just knew that I needed to do something. And in a way, like the bike ride itself was its own piece of art, um, that I was able to share with the world. And the book is kind of like the next step of that. But I felt a calling. It was inside of me, and when you feel that, when it starts, when it's like just a scream that you can't get rid of, you gotta kind of you gotta go down that path and explore it and see where it will take you. Not really have any expectation of where you're going to end up, but just kind of be open to the process and the experience.
I want to bring you into a reflective question. I want to
Hmm.
ask you to bring your awareness right now and go back to your 18-year-old self. And you have 3 words to tell your 18-year-old self to bring you to the journey to right now. What would those 3 words be?
I'll do it in two. Know thyself.
Mhm.
I mean, to me, self-awareness is the only game in town. Spirituality and the different tools that we can put in our toolbox is, they're just that. They're tools that one uses to have a better understanding of who they are. But I think they need to be that. You need to have the intention that this is a tool that I'm using to get inside of myself, to understand myself. Why do I believe the things that I believe in? Why do I react the way in which I react? Why do I respond? Why does my body do this? Why do I immediately go here when in the presence of certain people, or when experiencing something? That is the only game in town. I feel like self-awareness, one, if you don't know who you are, we've already kind of discussed this, the world is going to be telling you who you should be. And
Yeah.
if that and that 99 out of 100 times is going to be in conflict with what your foundation is. And you
Yeah.
need to understand what that foundation is. And the other thing, it's like when you're born, you're given this map, and there's a giant X on that map, and it's got the treasure that you need. If you don't know who you are, you don't know where you're starting on that map.
That's true.
So like self-awareness is the starting point of getting to that thing. And not only about self-awareness, the one of the things that I feel like I can shout this from on high is that like there's no way I can sell you anything.
Mm-hmm.
There's no method in which I can sell you. Not all tools do the same thing for the same for everybody. So
Mm-hmm.
part of the journey of self-awareness is you figuring out what tools work for you,
Exactly.
what tools challenge you, why they challenge you. You know what I mean? So that's why like self-awareness is the only game in town. I can't tell you how to go on the journey of self-awareness using the tools that I use for myself. I
Mm-hmm.
can say this is what I do and kind of give you a starting point of that you can try. And if you try it, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but it leads you down the path of like finding the other tools. But you need
Mm-hmm.
to figure out like your function, what works
Exactly.
for you. And like, so to me, it's like that's the only game in town. We have one job. You can be a professional alienator and alienate everybody in your life,
Mm-hmm.
but you still got to deal with one person, and that's you. So
Yeah.
figure that person out.
Yeah.
And to me, like that's I feel like my brother had a complete lack of self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's eventually like what killed him. It's like if
Yeah.
you are completely detached from yourself, it can send you down a spiral.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and that spirals also. I'm not going to say that everybody, if you don't know who you are, you're going to end up taking your life. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that like it could lead you to a spiral. I've met a lot of people that have, been masters of crafts in their life, and they've amounted masses of wealth, but they come to a point where they're like, all of this started because this is what the world told me I was supposed to do. And even though I've climbed these mountains and jumped over these hurdles, I'm depressed because they have no sense of self of who they are.
Yeah. They're trying to look for
So yeah,
that
18-year-old me, yeah,
know thyself. Yeah. And
know
it's
thyself.
true. Yeah. Because, time is a tool, it's not a toy. And then we come to realize like how much time we gave to the narratives of other people that we didn't take the stand in the permission of what is it that you want to create in this world? Who is it that you want to be in this world? Because a lot of people don't think they can give themselves permission for that. It's always the validation and
Yeah.
permission side of them. So once you access that, you understand, like, oh my gosh, I have to go inward. I got to stop inwardly. Yet that's, for everybody to finally go through their portal to really understand. And that's why I was a little hesitant when I took the direction of starting meditations with each podcast. Yet I was like, I know the benefit
Mhm.
of being in the breath and starting to recognize like you're not your thoughts and to create that space. So when you try to explain the observer and the awareness to people, they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then the wrong definition that people have about meditation, that it's going to quiet your mind and you're not going to have any thoughts. And I'm like,
Yeah.
sometimes,
Everybody's got the monkey with the cans. Ding
oh,
ding.
my,
But I think like I mean, that's usually like a body meditation, breath meditation is usually like what I recommend too, because it's like the reason why I give that is because hey, it's going to it's going to help you start a relationship with your own body,
yeah, it's
which is
protective for you.
very very good in the realm of yeah, but it's also like good in the realm of like awareness because
Yes.
our brains are tricksters. You
Yep.
know, I may I will I my brain will negotiate some kind and try to like create a reality inside to protect me from something, but my
Mhm.
body's not going to. My body is going to speak first, and then my brain has to catch up to it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Um,
I
so
always say that.
using the breath to get in touch with your body is amazing.
That's why it's like, and when people are like, when I, give the prompt that there's some feelings or sensations coming up, and people are like, how'd you know? And I'm like, because we numb, we stay in our head. We don't want to hear anything body's trying to tell us. I don't want to feel it. I don't want to see. I don't want to, I would rather be in the BS of the illusion, because there's also a part that you just want to go on autopilot. You don't want to do the work of self-awareness. That's being aware all the time, and it takes a lot of work to do that. Yeah, you can develop those tools. And on that note, I
Yeah.
know many people want to know where they can find you, Thomas. So can you let them know all your information and what you have to offer?
Yeah, if you go to risephoenix.org, that's going to have all the socials. It's going to have the links to my podcast. The podcast channel is Rise Frequency. But I have two different shows on there. I have like over 300 conversations with other people that I gave platforms to. And I think a lot of those are still relevant right now. Another show on that is called Stages, where it's just like an audio diary. I started like a few months after my mom died, and sometimes it's really sad stuff, and sometimes it's me laughing in the face of sadness. And it's just, you know, it's just absurd stuff. But I think that laughter to me is like my greatest tool for medicine.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, risephoenix.org, that's where there's also a link there for my book, 2012, A Bicycle Odyssey. You can find out what the hell is that turtle doing there? What does that mean? But I'm very proud of that. I always tell people that, there's some threads in there. If you lost somebody to suicide, there's a thread for you. If you like the beatnik lifestyle of life on the road, there's a thread in there for you. If you appreciate some type of like mystical, living, as Mark Maron would say, when life confounds me, I'll go mystical. There's a thread in there for you. And if you're a big nerd and you like pop culture, there's a thread in there for you. So, and if you like all four of those, hey, this is the book for you.
You're damn.
If you order one, please, and you like it, if you like it, give it to a friend.
Yes. And also leave reviews. Leave those reviews on those
Yeah,
websites, because it helps other people, get the information that they needed. Most of us are always looking at reviews to see, is it worth reading? Because everybody will sell whatever. Yet when we hear that other people benefited from it, so leave those reviews also. It really helps to build that community and that awareness and those conversations for other people. I want to thank you tremendously for, being here and actually really doing the alchemy in your life. You've taken those impurities and you've turned them into gold. And you didn't just keep the gold for yourself, you've shared it with so many people. So thank you for that warrior work that you continuously keep doing and sharing with other people. It is like, I'm in awe and I'm inspired, and I've learned some things through this conversation. So I want to really thank you, thank Mark in this space, thank your mother also, because I am one that when people transition, it's the other side of love. And if we go through our pain, then we can open up and feel their presence and feel the communication. Yet you have to be able to really feel the depths of the pain to be able to open up that heart to, feel that. So I want to
absolutely.
thank them for being in this conversation with us and empowering it. And, for those listeners that, this touched you, if at any time there was an inclination that, oh, like he's saying something or it's touching me, reach out to Thomas. Don't second guess. Don't try to, I don't know. Just click the link. All of his links will be in the show notes. So all you got to do is click that hyperlink and just reach out to him. As you heard in this conversation, this is the first time that we met, and you see how open he has been and how gracious he has been in the dialogue. Just reach out to him. When we're ready, the teacher appears. And there's a lot of experience that Thomas has to offer to give you a guiding post to go within yourself. So thank you again, Thomas, for being here.
Thank you. I really appreciate you. I appreciate it, Nat.
Appreciate you.
Please remember to be kind to yourself.
Hey, you made it all the way here. I appreciate you and your time. If you found value in this conversation, please share it out. If there was somebody that popped into your mind, take action and share it out with them. It possibly may not be them that will benefit. It's that they know somebody that will benefit from listening to this conversation. So please take action and share out the podcast. You can find us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok under Lift Oneself. And if you want to inquire about the work that I do and the services that I provide to people, come over on my website, come into a discovery call, liftoneself.com. Until next time, please remember to be kind and gentle with yourself. You matter.